Good morning to you, Mom, and to you, classmates. The discussion for today will be Lessee Accounting Basic Principles. In this chapter's discussion, we will be learning to define a lease under the new lease standard, to know the optional application of operating lease on the part of the lessee, to recognize a right of use asset in a financial lease, to understand the measurement of a right of use asset, to recognize a lease liability in a finance lease, and to understand the measurement of a lease liability in a finance lease. To start with, let us define what is a lease. So lease is a contract or a part of a contract that conveys the right to use the underlying asset for a period of time in exchange for consideration. In layman's term, lease is rent. And when we say a lease, there are two parties involved. We use the term lessor and lessee. So ano ba tong lessor at lessee? So lessor, the entity that provides the right to use an underlying asset for a period of time in exchange for consideration. At si lessee naman is the entity that obtains the right to use an underlying asset for a period of time in exchange for consideration. And that asset is what we call as underlying asset or an identified asset which will be provided by the lessor to the lessee. So sa kontrata ng lease, merong isang asset na pinapaupahan si lessor papunta kay lessee. And as the definition for lease goes, it is a part of a contract or a contract. So diba ganon, nag-uusap si lessor at si lessee wherein the rights and the property of the asset is transferred or conveyed from the owner, which is the lessor, to the lessee for a period of time. So from then on, lessee will be the one to use the said asset. It does not mean, however, that the lessee will hold the rights of the property until the end of its life. No, but only until the end of the certain period of time agreed by both parties from the beginning of the lease, which has been also stated in the contract. Pero ang tanong, bakit nga ba pinapahiram o pinapagamit ni lessor ang asset kay lessee? Well, it is because there is an exchange for a consideration. And what is meant by this term consideration? So of course, lessee will make payments to lessor. That's why the lessor allows lessee to use his asset. Another thing is, it was said here that the contract must convey the right to control the use of an identified asset or the underlying asset. So, diba, si lessee na yung gagamit ng asset. So, dapat may direct control siya doon sa mismong property. When the asset is on the lessee's custody, the lessee can use the underlying asset however he or she wants to. So, even if he will sublease the asset, it is okay. There won't be a problem because you can say that it is a lease if the property is on the lessee, but whenever lessor wants to do something with the asset, he must be followed. No, that is definitely not the case. Kasi habang inupahan or in-lease yung asset, si lessee ang may karapatan doon. So, lessee should obtain all the economic benefits from the asset and that he or she must have direct use and access to the identified asset. Okay. With regards to the accounting of the lease, each party will make an accounting, of course, depending on their situation, either as a lessor or a lessee. In this chapter, we are going to focus, however, on the lessee's side. So to start with, the standards for the accounting for lease on the side of the lessee has been changed. So in the past kasi, they used the IAF number 17 wherein there were two options on how to make an accounting for the lease on the side of the lessee. But now, the new standard, which is the IFRS or International Financial Reporting Standard number 16, is what we must follow. So,
My name is Jerry Rama Jr. All leases shall be accounted for by the lessee as a finance lease under the new lease standard. Finance lease model for lessee. IFRS 16 paragraph 22 provides that at the commencement date, a lessee shall recognize a right of the use asset and lease liability. A lessee is required to initially recognize a right of use of the underlying asset over the lessee term and lessee liability for the obligation to make. Ang nahiping asset mao ang hisgutan sa usa ka lease diin ang katungod aron magamit kana nga asset gihatag sa lessor didto ni lessee.
In a finance lease, we have the initial measurement wherein at the inception or the commencement date of the lease, we debit an asset and we credit a liability. You might be questioning why do we made an entry at this period. So to explain this, we start with the concept of the finance lease model. To better understand its concept, we shall go back to the principle of substance over form, which I think we have tackled in past accounting lessons. So if you remember this principle, this applies when there is a conflict between the form or the what we see and the substance or what is the truth. So of course, in this situation, substance always wins against the form. And when we speak of a lease, it means that the property is used by the other person for quite a time or for a certain period of time in exchange for some money payments. But the ownership of the property is still to the lessor kasi nga pinaupahan lang. Pero under the finance lease, substance and the form is not equal. Bakit nga ba hindi nagtutugma ang substance and form? It is because the lessor transfers substantially all the risk and rewards to the lessee, diba? And there are also some situations in which the lessor will transfer the title of the property to the lessee after the end of the term of the lease. So, parang lease to own. Kumbaga, pagkatapos ng napag-usapan na termino sa pag-upa sa isang property, hindi na isasauli ni lessee kay lessor yung property sapagkat sa kanya na yon. But take note, it should be stated in the contract at the very beginning of the lease that there will be a transfer of title of the property after the term. In this case, is it still a lease? Basically, no, but it is already a sale. Therefore, substance and form differ. Sa form or sa contract, nakalagay na ito ay lease. Pero, sa totoo naman pala ay sale. Since substance always wins against form, thus it is somewhat like an installment sale. In another situation also, sometimes the lessor will offer the lessee the option to purchase the asset or the property on a lower price than the fair value of the asset at the end of their term or the end of the term sa lease. Ng lease. So, dapat nakasaad din yung option na yon sa kontrata at the inception ng lease. In the sense na mas mura na yung price ng asset at the end of their term, thus, lessee will probably purchase the asset if he or she is reasonably certain na bibilhin niya yung asset at the end of the term ng lease. So, lessee will use the finance lease model in the making and accounting. Na kung saan mag-e-entry tayo ng right of use asset sa debit side kasi nga si lessee na yung nagsisilbing may-ari ng property. And lease liability on the credit side because as what I said kanina, lessee will make money payments kay lessor.